Well, Senator Lindsey Graham is dead, and we should talk about it, because for the last 30 years, it has been an open secret in Washington and among most queer activists that Lindsey Graham was probably gay. Welcome back to Yesterqueers. My name's Amanda, and I'm a public historian of queer history. I have some thoughts about the way that the discourse around Graham's sexuality is unfolding, especially online, and the impact that that may have on the millions of queer people living in the United States. I obviously have no problem talking about the queerness or alleged queerness of historical figures. I do it all the time in my work. One of the main concerns about outing living people, aside from the fact that it hijacks their autonomy, is that doing so may put them in physical or emotional danger. But that's not a concern for the deceased. They have left this mortal plane, and we cannot reach them with words or fists. Some would say that it jeopardizes people's legacies to discuss their queerness after death, but think about that for a second. The underlying assumption in that argument is that being queer is bad and it will negatively impact how we remember that person. I don't agree with that. I also don't agree that we shouldn't talk about a person's queerness when they're not around to defend themselves, because I wholeheartedly reject the notion that a person's gender or sexuality requires defense. They are facts about a person, as morally neutral as their hair color or favorite food, and we regularly discuss facts about historical figures that they themselves never made public. We publish diaries and private correspondence, visit museum exhibits about the secret lives of public figures, and we devour biographies and documentaries that reveal the most intimate details of people's lives. You rarely hear anyone say that those things are unethical, so why is discussing a person's queerness different? It isn't, or at least it shouldn't be. Discussing the genders and sexualities of the people who have shaped our world restores depth and complexity to stories that are usually flattened out into something quick and palatable, and provides new points of connection for modern scholars and history buffs alike. In the case of people like Roy Cohn and Lindsey Graham, it also provides vital context. I do not have sympathy for Lindsey Graham. Even if he was a deeply lonely man tormented by internalized homophobia, which I suspect he was, he had every opportunity to make different choices. Michael Twitty nailed it when he said on Threads yesterday that Graham could have been the Southern Harvey Milk. He had access to wealth and power and resources that most people only dream of, and yet at every opportunity he chose cruelty and called it conservatism. In the early days of his congressional tenure, the supposedly good days when he and John McCain were thick as thieves, Graham was still a war hawk who repeatedly voted against women, against immigrants, and against the queer community. Apparently he could really tell a joke, though, which is how he built his reputation, first in the House and then in the Senate, as a moderate who was willing to work across the aisle. It's why the Tea Party hated him so much. So after he got knocked out of the 2016 presidential election, Graham had enough political capital to form a coalition to try to keep the man that he called a clueless, race-baiting, xenophobic religious bigot out of the White House. But he didn't. And 2 months after the inauguration, he made his heel turn into Trump's lapdog. So yeah, I have no sympathy for Lindsey Graham. My concern is for the living, breathing queer people in the United States who will now have to suffer the consequences of the discourse that is raging across the internet and the coverage that is plastered across mainstream media, because it is already trending heavily homophobic and anti-sex worker. The people who hate us also hated Lindsey Graham. He was useful, especially once he became a bootlicker, so they tolerated him, but make no mistake, when that Cheeto-dusted narcissist in the White House finally kicks it and the conservatives in power are trying to rewrite his legacy in real time to launder their own reputations, they will sacrifice Graham. His queerness will become the deviance that led him to a lie with Trump. Maybe they'll even suggest that he had a little crush on the president. They will try to wipe their hands clean on Graham's corpse, and then they will use him as a cautionary tale to explain why they need to come down even harder on the LGBTQIA+ community. We cannot let that happen. Lindsey Graham devoted his entire career to hoarding and holding power. We should discuss his record and his probable hypocrisy in full, while also acknowledging that his sexuality was not the driving force behind his political legacy. Lindsey Graham may have been a closeted gay man, but that's not why he was a cruel and selfish coward. That's it for today.